All right. So welcome everyone to our MMI Master Skills workshop this evening. Thank you all for joining in. I'm just going to start with an invitation. If anyone would like to put on their cameras, would really appreciate it. Later on, we'll encourage you again to put them on, but it's so great to see your faces, say hello, and feel like we've got some people to talk to rather than talking at a screen. So yes, hello, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we might just begin, and we've got a bit of time if we've got a few more people joining. So if you've got any friends or anyone else who's still deciding whether to join, they definitely still can. I'll give you a bit of a rundown on how the event's going to work tonight. But firstly, I would just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country, and on behalf of my team here tonight, would like to pay my respects to the traditional and rightful owners of the land. For me, I live and work on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I pay my respects to them, to elders past, present and emerging, and to anyone attending to this event or watching the recording who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So welcome. Our event this evening is an MMI Master Skills workshop. Before we get going, I thought I would give you a bit of a rundown on some things about us here at Halad. So just as a bit of an idea of what's... Oh, why isn't it letting me open the poll? I might ask Eliza, are you able to open the polls?
Oh my God, crap. Yep.
Yeah, cool. I don't know why it's not letting me, but
I think I overread your things.
if you could poll just in general, like who's heard of us before, who hasn't. I've got a poll set up. If you could open that, please. Hopefully that's working. While you do that, I'm going to see if I can sign back in. Okay. Cool. Sure thing. Is the poll not working? Okay, I don't know why this is not working. This one is for MMIs. So if anyone's here for...
Wait, Sarah, can you see the poll answers?
No.
Oh, I can. Do you want me to report on the answers?
I mean, it might as well. I'm not sure why it's not working, but we've had a few issues with it. Okay, go for it. Yes.
Okay, cool. So the answers are: question 1, have you attended a Halad event before? 64% have said yes. Cool. Have you ever sat the game set before? 86% have said yes, I'm a resitter. Cool. And 14% have said no, I'm a first-time sitter.
Ooh, okay, awesome. So we've still got people coming. If you could, Liza, you're also a co-host, if you could take care of that, yep. People in the waiting room, and we'll continue going. Okay, so quite a few of you, about 60%, have heard of us before, know who we are, have come along to a Halad event before. Welcome back. For those who haven't, a little bit about us. We're a not-for-profit that we run affordable GAMSAT and med-entry tuition that makes a social impact. So basically we run health education missions in the Philippines. We have a team over in the Philippines who work hard behind the scenes. You don't get to see a lot of what they do because you see a lot of this space and this side of things, but that is where the funds from what we do go to. And we're all about making sure that people have free and equal access to the health education that I think we all take for granted, and that definitely you would take for granted if you're looking to get into the medical field. So it's something that we're very grateful that we're able to do here at Halad. And the second thing is that it's just really important to us that you feel like you're able to succeed and that you feel like you're in a conducive environment to do that. So there's nothing more important to us than seeing people succeed and do their best. We're not here to try and force you to have a rehearsed answer or to have a particular way of going into your interviews. We just want you to become the best health professionals that you can. And that starts right now. That starts from being the best med student you can be, the best med student candidate you can be, wherever you're at in your journey to what you want to do and to your goals and your dreams. That's what we're here to help you out with. So a little bit about today. Make the most of the team. Unfortunately, Karim isn't here tonight, but we do have some wonderful tutors who are here with me. A little bit about me. I've completed my 3rd year of med at Monash. I'm currently taking a break and I run the med entry program here at Halad. I have a group of tutors here with me tonight. I'm going to get into that in a little bit and a little bit about how they're going to help you out and make this an interactive and enjoyable event for you. So just a little bit more about our med interviews, how we run MMI practice is that it's all about authenticity and being yourself. So as much as it really does matter to nail the interview, I know that you've all sat some form of interview before and tried to prepare for it. As much as they matter, what matters more is that you learn how to be yourself and how to present yourself so that no matter what you're asked about, no matter the questions on the day, no matter what you actually have logistically prepared, you can go in and show them why you deserve a spot in their medical program or in their healthcare program, why this is what you need to be doing and why they need you. And that's what we're here to help you to do. So just had a quick question here about, will the MMI interview recording be uploaded or sent to everyone? Everyone will be sent the recording afterwards. It will also be uploaded to our YouTube. But those of you who are here today, you'll definitely have a leg up because you get a chance to practice live and get live feedback, which I'll get into. I don't know why these slides are not the ones I updated. We're not having a great day, but today's plan, I'll talk you through. Maybe I have a better slide of this. Nope. Okay, I'm just going to talk you through it. So today's plan is I'm going to spend max 10 minutes just giving you a little bit of a rundown on a few tips just in case this is your first touch point with any form of MMI practice. If you've practiced before, it might be a little bit of a repeat, refresh, etc. That's great too. Then we're going to spend some time doing some actual interview stations. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we think will give you the most outcome from this event or give you the most benefit from this event. But we're going to run 4 different stations. I'll go over the station types at the time and give you a few tips as well for them. And you'll go through the stations in breakout rooms and you'll have 1 examiner per breakout room to help you out. They'll run the station as if you're doing it. And then there'll be about 10 minutes of time for you to actually get feedback from the other people in the breakout room who are listening in and from the station, from the examiner for the station. So we just have 2 asks to make this as effective as possible. And the first one is to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I totally know what it feels like to come to these things and go, I'm just going to sit here silent with my microphone off. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to put my hand up because I really don't like doing that. And I just like to learn by taking notes. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But the most beneficial way to approach this event would be to put up your hand for one of the stations and say, yep, I'm going to have a go at it. Doesn't matter if I have no idea what I'm saying. That's literally the point of this event and the examiners will help you out. So that's the first thing, be a bit uncomfortable. That is where you grow, that's where you learn. And obviously this one, speak to others how you'd like to be spoken to. Once people have put themselves out there, make sure that you give them good feedback, make sure you speak to them respectfully, all of the things that I'm sure you would all do anyway. So these are our 2 asks. Okay, cool. Thank you for setting up the breakout rooms. Okay, so I'm just really quickly going to go over a little bit about the minds of the markers, what's behind the scenes, because basically when you go into those breakout rooms, the examiners there are going to pretend to be your markers, or they will be your markers as you give the stations a go. So I wanted to give you a bit of an insight into what are we actually thinking when we listen to you go through these stations. So the first thing that we're looking for is we're looking for a real person. So when you like check that little thing on the recapture to say, I'm not a robot, or now you have to like click like all the pictures that have a bus in it. And I'm like, I don't actually know if it has a bus in it or not. And it's really annoying. But the main thing is they want to see that you are actually authentic and real and truly you, that you're not walking in with a script. You're not walking in like a robot. They want to know that you're real and authentic. The reason why is that the best healthcare professionals, and I think it's helpful if you all think of an experience that you've had with a positive experience with a healthcare professional, what made it positive? And you'll find that there was a good balance of these two things, humanness and clinical expertise, that they were both able to connect with you and they were also able to offer you the necessary advice and care. And so that's what they're assessing in MMIs is, are you someone who has this humanness element? And are you someone who, when you have the knowledge to back it up, would be able to provide trustworthy clinical expertise? So let's talk about our actual approach, structuring what we say, all of those really boring but very essential things. The first thing you need to do is read the scenario. I think it might be like everyone's sort of got a different stress response. Some of us are more like fight, some are more flight, some freeze. Reading the scenario, especially if you're in one of those MMI circuits where you've got 1 minute or 2 minutes of reading time and you've just done another station, it's very easy for your mind to be frazzled, maybe focused on the last station, focused on something silly you said, or looking at the station going, oh my gosh, this station is on ethics and I hate ethics or whatever. It's really important that you have a repeatable approach for every scenario that you read. So what do I think? I have 2 questions that I always ask myself. Come up with your own. You can use these or springboard off of these if you like. I always go, what do I think about this? How does it relate to me? Or what connection do I have to this? That helps me to ground myself to the station and to relax. Sometimes even just take a deep breath first. Breathe, start afresh. So have your own approach. This approach might vary depending on the station. Today, we're going to get to a station that will show you that maybe this approach won't be as helpful for, but different station types you might approach slightly differently. You'll see what I mean. So in terms of actually structuring your response, I'm not going to actually go over the nitty-gritty of lots of different structures. Here are a few dot points. This time last year, I ran a very similar event where I dove into every one of these approaches or these structures. If that's something that interests you, when I send out the recording for this event, I'm actually going to put the link to the recording of that one and I'll write a reminder of what I went into. So if you'd like to watch that and practice some different structures, there's about half an hour at the start where I go through each of these and where they can be helpful. So my, I guess, advice today is if you aren't confident with your structure, or if the examiner tells you, hey, how the way that you structured your answers was really confusing, or it didn't seem like you had much structure, or you seemed really scattered, spend some time finding structures that you can really nail and that make sense for you and that help you to collect your thoughts. So again, the structure will depend on the station type. So practicing will help you find what works for you. So is that okay? And just some sort of key tips about your response overall. These are things I think that I've noticed over, I guess, the past year and a half, is that the first thing is that it's very easy in these stations to want to be politically correct and so remain a fence sitter. So your job, I would strongly recommend today, practice putting forward an opinion and being confident in that opinion. Even if the examiner later says, hey, your opinion was a little bit too forward or forceful, we can help you to pare that back, as opposed to you going, oh, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. So try and make a decision, or you can explain what it would take for you to make a decision in that scenario. So maybe saying something like, I don't really know what I would do, but if I had the opportunity to call this person, then this is what I would talk about with them so that we could make this decision. So doctors aren't fence sitters. At some point, you have to make a decision as a medical professional. So make a decision in the stations as well. We already spoke about not being a robot, not rambling. They deliberately have a set of questions, answer the question and move on. Sometimes you'll finish the questions before the station is over. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes you won't finish all the questions before the station's over. That's also not a bad thing. Neither is a bad thing necessarily. It's whether you're like getting to the point, showing your understanding of the station, showing those balances of humanness and your ability to reason. That's what they're looking for. You're more than welcome, and I think sometimes we don't know this, you're more than welcome to ask for clarifications. Can you repeat the question for me, please? I don't understand the question. If the examiner isn't allowed to elaborate, they'll just say, sorry, give it the best you've got, or sorry, just have another go, rereading it. Often they'll have the actual station there for you to view unless there's a good reason that they don't. So feel free to just ask for clarifications. The worst they can say is no. And engage in your own way. So be professional with them, but still be personable. Something that came up in last year, because everything was quite new particularly, is Zoom etiquette and professionalism on Zoom. It can feel a little bit different than being in the same room as someone. So if you're doing interviews online, being extra conscious of how you actually present online and the way that you make eye contact through a screen and things like that, because those things still matter, but they might be a little bit trickier to do. So these are sort of some go-to things that our examiners will be looking for. And this statement, of course, practice makes perfect, but here we prefer perfect practice makes perfect. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. We're never expecting that. That means applying things the right way and giving them a go the right way is what will help lead you to success, rather than practicing the same mistakes and making those mistakes permanent. So I have, I guess, the exact same things that I just said, but in a table form as do's and don'ts, if you would prefer this table form. Probably the only other sort of extra things I would add here is this one about overly controversial opinions. And I get a lot of questions about this. Is it okay to say this? Is it okay to say that? Can I talk about politics? Can I talk about religion? All of those gray area topics. And I know people don't like this answer, but it's very much it depends. It really does depend. It depends on how you contextualize it. Depends on whether it's relevant. It depends on how you come across. Are you coming across as personable? Are you coming across as logical, reasonable, or are you coming across as being really close-minded? So I think if you do think that you might have a controversial opinion about something, practice it. Practice speaking about it with friends, practice speaking about it to family members in mock MMI stations, things like that, so that you can check, is it okay for me to say something like that? Do I make sense when I say something like that? So nothing wrong with voicing your opinion. Sometimes you just need to check whether your opinion is appropriate to put in the context that you're putting it. And sometimes we don't know unless we practice. So some typical stations. Now, I believe that last week, Gabby and Karim ran an event where they did a lot of the overview of how MMIs work and how different med schools approach them and things like that. They go into a lot more detail. I'll also make sure that you have an access to the recording from last week in case you missed it. But this is just an overview again of the typical stations that you can see during MMIs. We're not going to tackle all of them today, but you can have a look at these in your own time, and almost any medical school will provide you with sort of a snapshot of what each of these could possibly look like, or a brief overview of what they could look like as well. But if you're practicing in your own time, probably best to write a couple stations for each one of these dot points, because these are things that typically come up. So today, what we're not going to do is we're definitely not going to tell you what to say. And we're definitely not going to say this was the right answer, this was the wrong answer. There's no right or wrong. So no one's sneakily hiding a right answer and waiting for you to say it. What we will do today is give you a guide on how to form your own opinions and to respond to the stimuli that you're being given. So the stimuli being the STEM and being the questions that the examiners ask you. We'll give you some feedback and some advice, and we'll just help you to get some practice. So what is today specifically going to be? We're going to do 4 different stations. The first one is going to be problem solving / a responding to stimulus station. It's probably the trickiest one of today. It's probably one that might catch you off guard a little bit. Please have a go at it. Please be open-minded about it. And I promise you that the feedback that the examiners give you will be helpful for a station like this. Then we have a general ethics station. This station will come up in almost every single med interview circuit, an excellent one for you to practice your ethics skills. We have a public health station, and then we have an Indigenous health station. So before each station, I'm going to give you a few little heads up about that station, just in case this is your first time having a go at something like this. And then I'm going to show you the STEM for 2 minutes. We're going to follow the 2-minute model of the reading time and the 8-minute model of the responding time, just for today. What I would recommend, I get a lot of questions about this. When I practice, should I follow this model or that model? It doesn't matter. when they write MMIs, they write them to make sure they fit in the time that they've selected for their medical school. As long as you practice and you're practicing good quality MMI stations, it doesn't matter what timing you stick to, because it will be standardized to the correct timing according. So if you're sitting med interviews at 3 different med schools and they're all using different timing, don't stress, because they're not going to all have the exact same stations and expect you to squash it into different amounts of time. So today we're going to have 2 minutes reading time, 8 minutes go time, and then you'll get about 10 minutes of feedback time as well in your breakout rooms. So be prepared to volunteer. It's an opportunity for you to just get some feedback to see where you're at. And our tutors are very experienced. They're all in medical school. They're all happy to help you out, so you can get some live feedback from them. So I would love for you all to meet our examiners this evening. If you could all just go around, say hello, say who you are, where you go to med school, wave, and then we'll get started. So maybe we'll start with Jasmine, because you're first on my screen.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I'm a first year med student at Monash. I interviewed at both Monash and Melbourne last year, but ultimately ended up at Monash. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll just pass on to Georgia.
Hi guys, so I'm Georgia, and like Jasmine, I'm at Monash in first year. And I'll pass on to Izzy.
Hey guys, I'm Izzy. Like Jasmine and Georgia, I'm also a first year med student at Monash. I guess I'll pass on to Prav.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Prav. I'm a bit different to everyone else. I'm a first year student at UCIT, med student.
So hi everyone, I'm Lucy and I'm a second year medical student at the University of Melbourne, and I'm currently based in Shepparton. So that's fun.
I'm Nada. I'm a second year medical student at Monash, and I'm sorry to hear that, Lucy.
Amazing. So something else I would recommend is, if you get a few minutes left in your breakout rooms, you're waiting for other groups to finish up, make the most of asking questions to our examiners. Ask them what med school's like, ask them what placement's like, whatever you want to know. They're literally here to help out this evening. So first station, we're going to jump right in, is a problem solving station. Also, if you have questions, feel free to shout them out, put them in the chat, whatever works for you. So we are going to do a problem solving station. I very loosely called this problem solving. To be more specific, you're going to be given a visual stimulus and I'm going to get you to respond to it. So I've given you a little bit of a hint. So the goal for a station like this is really to showcase how you think. Just show how you think through things, think through a problem, think through a scenario that maybe isn't typical to what you were expecting. And the reason why they sometimes give you stations like this is because they want to check, are you able to deal with stress and pressure, or do you crack? So when you have a go at this station, your job is to not crack. So if you can keep that in mind, that's mainly what they're looking for. The marker is looking for your response to stress, your ability to deal with something that's unfamiliar to you or that you might not fully understand, and your ability to still reason through that. Something to note is, when you see this station, it's okay, you can get annoyed with me later, but literally anything in interviews is fair game. And those who sat a particular interview last year might remember that a very similar station to what we're about to do was given, and you were given 5 minutes to respond to some very difficult images, basically showing some images that then you had to answer a bunch of questions about. So that's what we're going to do. Please feel welcome and open and prepared to volunteer to have a go at the stations in your breakout rooms, so that everyone can get involved and everyone can get the most out of the event this evening. So just before we start, I just wanted to check in if anyone had any questions. No? Cool. Okay. So what you're going to do, I'll give you 2 minutes to read the scenario. In this case, it will be, I'll show you a slide. You're going to have 2 minutes to look at it. After the 2 minutes is up, I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms. They're going to pick someone, or if you volunteer in your breakout room, to have a go at the station. If everyone else in the room can have a go at it in their heads, then you'll get more out of it. So that's my tip to you. And then after the 8 minutes is up, the examiner will ask you questions as you go. You'll have 10 minutes to get some feedback. Cool. So can I get thumbs up, heads nodding, yes in the chat when everyone's ready? Good to go with that. Sweet. Exciting. Okay, cool. So here is your first station. You have 2 minutes to look at this slide. Okay, so that's 2 minutes. So I'm going to get Eliza to open the breakout rooms and we'll get started.
Enjoy. I'll let you go wherever.
Disjointed. Maybe it's a reflection of maybe those environments being disrupted. So I think I think the disruption of that is another similarity. I think one difference was what type of nature they were talking about. The left-hand image was, as I said before, maybe more like land-based and terrestrial, whereas the right-hand image was mainly a bit more fluid and talking about water in the ocean. I think another difference might be that there was a bit more in the right-hand image, there's a bit more of like a top-down approach, kind of where you had the top-down segregation, where you had the clouds and then the water, whereas the left-hand image was kind of just one consistent layering where there was only like the forest and not really much depth in terms of something being above or below the other one.
Right, thank you. If you had known about question 1 prior to viewing the images, how would your approach to viewing them have changed?
I think I probably would have tried to see exactly what, like, similar themes between them, kind of unifying themes. And I think that was actually something that I was doing, but obviously it's easy to look for something when you know what you're meant to look for. So knowing question 1, I probably would have maybe seen how exactly they differ in terms of like maybe what they represent overall. I think I was okay with how I approached it before knowing question 1, but I think maybe looking at trying to see specific images, maybe like in terms of sub images within each image about different themes and maybe how they interrelate together in terms of just trying to make sense of the whole thing as a whole.
So I'm going to now show you a slide with 3 images, 2 of which you've already viewed, and some quotes. And when you're ready, just please match one quote to each image and explain your selection. Can you see that?
Yep. Sorry, just rearranging my screen. Yep, all good. So you just want me to start whenever?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
So I think for me, that quote, calm her chaos, but never silence her storm, kind of fits best, in my opinion, with image 2, mainly because I see some sort of rain clouds, and, rain clouds are part of storms. And so I think that image is a good representation of maybe what that middle image is trying to show in terms of everything being disjointed and storms bringing about chaos. So I think that chaotic nature aligns pretty well. I think the quote, storytelling is the greatest activity of any culture. It's how you pass along identity, matches well with image 3, because it looks like there are 3 people in that image, and they kind of have different representations. The lady on the left has she seems bigger than the other ladies, and maybe that's a reflection of how she sees her identity. Maybe she's got a strong identity, a strong personality, and her talking to the other figures, maybe that's her story telling about her identity. Those 2 people listening to that story, maybe that's how they build up their own identity, because I guess that's what identity is in some cases. It's kind of a amalgamation of your life experiences, how you see things, how you're brought up, and those sort of things. I think for image 1, I think the quote, everything is noisy and messy, you need to deal with the noise and uncertainty, fits that best for me, because as I said before, I found image 1 a bit more difficult to discern what was really happening compared to image 2. And so I think that quote, everything is noisy and messy, kind of relates back to that image 1, where I interpreted it as being nature. But even though I could see it was nature, I could also see that it was very noisy and messy. And I guess how well you deal with that can kind of determine whether you see nature as just some sort of mess that happens, or whether you see the beauty and the beauty of nature, a really complex system.
Thank you. And your last question is, which of the 3 images resonates best with you, and why?
I think for me personally, image 3 probably resonates best with me, because contrasting to the first 2 images, image 3 is more easy to understand, and that image of storytelling, and it kind of seems like a calm scenario. They're sitting around, they're lying down, they're sharing identity with each other, they're storytelling with each other. And so that's kind of one way I'd like to think that I live my life. I don't really like chaos. I like to plan and try to prepare as best I can for things. But I think within that, life is also very important in my life to share experiences with other people, connect with other people. And so the storytelling that might be going on in image 3 is something that I think best reflects what I seek to achieve in my life and how I try to live my life.
Awesome, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to add, or you all good?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank you.
So I'll stop sharing my screen. Firstly, before I give my feedback, how do you think you went?
I think not great, but
it was a bit of a tough one. It's really abstract, and it's really like left-sided kind of question. I think last year was the first time that this sort of question kind of made an appearance in the MMI rounds. I think you did a really good job. What does everyone else in this little breakout room think? Got some thumbs up here. Yeah, so I think you did a really, really good job. I think I'll give you some general feedback from your performance overall. I think just in general, your eye contact and your ability to build rapport with me as an interviewer was really good. You were really easy and clear to understand. The pace of your speech was really like it wasn't too slow, but it wasn't too fast. That was really good. And I found in general the structure of your responses were really good. And just stemming from that with the structure, especially with question 1, when I asked you about the similarities and differences, I really liked how you first started off with explaining what you found similar. Then you went on to say, what you found were the differences instead of just going between, one and the other. So it was really easy to understand with what you were trying to say. So for question 1, list of similarities and differences, I think the strongest, your strong point was being able to identify just more than the superficial similarities and differences. So looking past the colors used, the kind of shapes used, you went on to explain, how the images made you feel. So you kind of talked about the vibe you got from each photo. I think you mentioned in the second image, it felt a bit chaotic. It felt a bit more, I think, disjointed or disrupted, and the different types of nature and the different types of approaches that the artist might have used to construct that image. I think that was really, really good. I think the second question I asked you, if you'd known about question 1 prior to viewing the images, how would your response change? This kind of question was trying to ask, or was trying to show the interviewer how you self-reflect. So, I asked if you had known the task, how would you, improve? And you mentioned, you try to look at the different themes maybe, and you highlighted the importance of understanding the task, knowing what you need to do in order to have a good output. And I really like that. Again, the structure for this one was really good. I don't really have too much to say about this one. For question 3, I showed you the 3 images and you had to match the quotes. So I think again, the structure here was really good, but you tended to start off with, you talked about, I chose this quote because, I think for the calmer chaos, you chose the second image because it looked chaotic. And I think you went to elaborate a bit more about why you chose the second quote, but I think starting off with saying, I chose the second quote because, the image felt disjointed. I felt confused when I was looking at the image was probably a bit better way to start, because it just shows that you have, that emotional and logical reasoning behind choosing the quotes to the image rather than just looking at it superficially. So instead of leading your sentence with saying, I chose this quote about chaos because the image looked chaotic, it'd probably be better to say, I chose this quote about chaos because this image made me feel a bit confused and a bit disjointed, and go on with elaborating on that, which you did. Same with the third image. I think you might have led on with, I chose this quote about story because it looked like this person was telling a story to her friends. And you did go on to elaborate, which is really good, but I think leading on with how the image made you feel would make your response stronger. You had the points there. I think just changing around how you structured that would make your response a bit stronger. And yeah, so the fourth question, which of the images resonates most with you and why? You chose image 3. There's no right answer. I liked how you went to explain that, you found it was easier to understand. You found that you could connect to the image a lot better because, it was less, I'd say, abstract than the other ones, which is a good explanation. But I think this is also a really good opportunity to tell the interviewer or let the interviewer know a little bit about yourself. So rather than just saying, I think because, my friends, I think you mentioned storytelling and, that towards the end of your response, that was really good. But again, leading with that and saying, I resonated with this most because, there's a person telling stories and I really value my friends and I really value connecting with others. You can even go on to explain how that's impacted you now with COVID. So just not being afraid to let the interview know a little bit about yourself. But yeah, in general, I think your responses are really good. I think just change the structure. this is a really hard station. So don't beat yourself down in it. There aren't too many stations like this, but just in case this one does come up, this station just tries to assess how you can emotionally connect with things. Like that's really important as a doctor, being able to form those connections with people and being able to explain your reasoning. So I think in general, you did really, really well. But yeah, do you have any questions? I wish I could turn my camera on. It's just not working right now. So hopefully I can fix that when we get back into the main breakout room. But I'm giving you rounds of applause.
Thank you. I was just wondering, like, how much room is there for personal anecdotes in like maybe those last two questions? Like, would it be too off topic to say, you know, I really like the storytelling aspect and then go into like a personal anecdote about how much it means to you, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just to let you know how you were doing on timing, you had around 1.5 minutes left from when I stopped you. So when I asked you, do you have anything else to add? You had 1.5 minutes left. So I say in that situation, you did have enough time. But again, it depends. Like if you notice that you are running out of time, probably not. Just get the points you want out there. But definitely for this one, I think, especially since you had time, it'd be nice for the interviewers to know a little bit about yourself. But yeah, I think when I asked you at the end, if you have anything else to add, if you are running out of time, don't feel pressured to add anything. I think that was one thing that I made a mistake on when I was practicing last year. I felt like I had to say all the things I was saying in my head, but usually the first things you say are the ones you feel, or you feel most strongly about. And it's usually the ones that you'll be able to portray to the interviewer a lot clearer than the thoughts that are kind of messed around in your mind. So if you are feeling out of time, don't feel pressured to add anything else, because that might just be a bit detrimental to all the hard work you'd already done. But like I said, you had a bit of plenty of time for that one. So I think that would have been fine. All good.
I will just also add one other thing to that answer from Isabel. Like with this third image that you spoke about, Sam, about like it resonating with you, that opportunity to say, even just like briefly, like the storytelling resonates with me and here's a reason why, is a really lovely way to show why it resonates. And they write these questions deliberately, and we write these questions. And I mean, like if all we asked was which image resonates with you, then that means that 33% of candidates will say the same thing as you. They'll say image 3, and 33% will say image 1, and 33% will say image 2, roughly. And so that's neither here nor there. It's what you add to it. And so absolutely feel free to add a story. It's never amiss to add a personal anecdote. Don't feel like you're oversharing. Obviously read the context. And if it's like, oh, that's way too far left, it's not the appropriate anecdote. But absolutely, if you have something that's appropriate, don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't say it because some rule somewhere said not to say an anecdote. So absolutely, if it felt like it fit in, go for it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if anyone else had any other comments or questions, go for it, because you've got a couple more minutes.
Yes, go ham. You can ask them verbally or send them through chat.
I would just like to know what you thought for question 2. With regard to if you'd known what the question was going to be, what would you have done differently? What would be a good structure in your mind to think, okay, how am I going to go about this question? That to me, just I was a bit like, oh, okay, I don't know. How would you approach that if you knew?
I think for this question, this was asking more like it's about self-reflection. So how I personally would have done it is identify maybe what I found difficult that first time round. So not knowing, okay, I didn't really know what I was doing with the tasks, and that's, oh, sorry, the timer just went off. Explaining to the interviewer what I found difficult with the tasks. So maybe I didn't really know what I was looking for. I felt myself, I was scrambling to find things, or I didn't know what to do with this information. Just explaining that to the interviewer first. So that's showing the interviewer that you can identify your weaknesses. And then going back, touching back on, okay, this is what I found hard. And if I'd known about the question, then I would have done this differently to improve, you know, this thing that I found hard, and it will lead to this outcome. So I think that's how I would have done it. But there are different ways.
Hello. Is everyone coming back? All right, so I'm doing another rotation of everyone. All right, sweet.
Cool. Welcome back. So I have a little poll for you all. Ignore what it's called. I want you to put how you felt about that station, whether you did it personally or whether you were following along, between 1 or 0 and 5. How did you feel about it? 5 being awesome, 0 being it was a nightmare. Oh, we almost had no zeros. That's okay. Yeah, it says it's about GAMSAT. Tried to edit it, but that, yeah, Zoom's having a day, or maybe it's me having a day, maybe both, but that's all good. Just put it in for how you felt about this station. Awesome, everyone has. Cool. So we've got some zeros, some zeros and ones, and we've got some 4s and 5s. So that's awesome. Just before we follow on or move on to the next station, did anyone have any questions about this station that wasn't answered in your group, or you ran out of time, or you just want to ask any other questions about it? I'll give you a moment if you're typing one in the chat or thinking of any. Just one question that came up was about the second question. So the second question being a reflective question on, like, what would you have done or said differently if you'd known what you were going to be asked? And something that can come up is actually, oh, but like I kind of had guessed what I was going to be asked, or I had a good feeling that's what I was going to be asked, or even like I've seen one like that before, or whatever. And so you actually were prepared for it. Don't make it up. Just be honest. Just be like, you know what, actually, when I was using the 2 minutes to view them, I thought maybe that was something I could be asked about. So I was trying to focus on it. Now that I know that that was the question, maybe I would have thought a little bit more deeply about this element or this aspect or whatnot. So please be honest. No need to make something up because you think that's what they want to hear. Just be honest. Just say whatever was going through your brain in a logical, structured way. That's the trick with these stations. So the next station type we're going to do, it's not letting me share my screen now, is an ethics station. Here we go. So a little bit about ethics stations for med interviews. The first thing is that when you are doing just preparation for ethics-based interviews, oh, am I recording again? I am, good, okay. For ethics-based interviews is that this is a very common station type. So you guys would have seen a lot of different stations to practice with. You're probably very familiar with seeing these if you've already started your practice. And there are 2 broad types of ethics-based stations. One of them is a medical ethics station. So it will be sort of a medical setting. You might be a doctor, or you might be in a professional setting. You might be making a medical decision. It might be about a patient. The other type is general ethics, and that's just everyday situations, things that happen in real life, in the community, etc. They have nothing to do with medicine or with your professional life, and they're just showing how do you think about ethics and values and morals. Both are fair game. Some unis preference one type over the other. It doesn't really matter which ones you do or don't get. You should be responding roughly the same. The only difference is if the station is a medical ethics one, they'll be expecting a lot more like professional skills based thinking, whereas if it's a general ethics one that doesn't have any component of you having a job in it or anything like that, then they might not be expecting any of those sorts of thinking skills. Instead, they'll be looking at your everyday values and your everyday morals and the way that you just respond to everyday situations. So that's really the 2 broad categories of these kinds of stations. There's plenty to practice with online if you're not comfortable with them. So the goal for you is to make decisions based on the situation and the information you have. or to discuss what decisions you would consider making or what extra information you would like in order to make a decision. So what I said about fence sitting, we don't like fence sitting in ethics because ethics is a divider. Ethics makes people question and makes people go, oh, I feel uncomfortable. And we want to see how you manage that. So it doesn't mean you have to jump to something and say an instant yes or a no. We still want to hear you talk through your ideas, but we also want to hear you make a decision or say, I would do this if I knew about this or if I was able to understand this. So what the market is looking for is your ability to invest both emotionally and logically in the scenario. So can you see sort of the emotional side of the situation and that we're dealing with real people, but can you also see the logical side? And with that, can you understand the ethical pillars at play? If you've done any form of medical healthcare ethics before, these 4 dot points have been burnt into your brain by now. For those of you who haven't and that this is fresh for you, go and read pretty much any intro to medical ethics document and you'll see these 4 dot points nicely spelled out for you. So today, if you have a go at the station and you don't know what these 4 are, that's fine. Just talk about the ethics and the examiner might go through what these are with you. If you are very familiar with them, have a go at putting them into your vocabulary and practicing actually saying what they mean and how they apply to the scenario. My tip with this one is don't say all 4 just because, only say the ones that are actually applicable to the scenario and say how they're applicable. A lot of scenarios, all 4 will be applicable somehow, but sometimes they're not. So have a look at that. And then the last thing is considering different ethical viewpoints. I put these big fancy words here almost as like an eye attention grab and a reminder that you don't need to use the big fancy words. You can just say things like, I value health and well-being for all as opposed to giving the best for the one. So that's why I would go with this option. Or maybe it's I value cultural beliefs. So that's why I'd go with this option. Whatever, you don't have to use the fancy words, but basically showing that you know that there are multiple answers or multiple decisions that you can make in these kinds of stations. So that's what I'm going to sort of give you as some of the tips going into this station. If you want to quickly Google these terms, feel free, or if you want to during your 2 minutes reading time, you're welcome to if you think that would be beneficial. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes again to read the station, and then when you go to the breakout room, there'll be some questions for you. My troubles away, one more glass of champagne, and you know I'm the first to say that I'm not perfect, and you're the first to say you want the best thing, but now I know a perfect way to let you go. You're my last hope. Okay, that's time. So I'm just going to check, Eliza, are those breakout rooms ready to go? Yeah, okay. And I'll open the rooms. I still have the same people for all of the rooms.
As someone who you're meeting out for the first time, having a drink, and you're long-term friends with Ronnie, that's a vastly different situation than if Clara's your best friend and she's telling you about a new guy that she's been in a relationship with. That's a vastly different thing. I think 2 is the reasons for cheating. Now, I think blanket thing, cheating is a very bad thing, but I think it is important to considering to give as much as you can, give the benefit of the doubt, and maybe consider the reasons they're cheating. Maybe it doesn't just specify what cheating it is. It could be flirty text messages. It could be re-downloading a dating app or something. You know, like for example, like extreme example, but I'm doing my PhD in intimate partner violence. You know, these things happen, and it could be like that's an extreme example, but maybe there are extreme driving forces that are pushing her to seek something outside of that. So I think maybe not the first thing you think of, but you know, perhaps it would require maybe in that conversation, you know, it would depend on the reason she's given for it. I think also, yeah, I guess the sort of the degree. So maybe not the highest level of maybe not the first thing you think about, but I think it also is important to consider sort of the framework and the friendship group that they're in. For example, if you're very close friends with one of them, don't know the other, don't know their entire friendship group or something, that may be very different than, for example, I had 2 friends, like I was caught in the middle of a situation with 2 very close friends of mine, long-term relationship, who had all the exact same friends. And the way that you handle a situation like that may be vastly different when you have to consider that your decision has very different implications. So it's a very hard question to answer this when I don't have more details. I guess, yeah, ethically, the right thing to do is to tell them, assuming that there's not some extreme, you know, if you're friends with both of them. But I think that if Clara tells you this, I think you, as the friend, the best thing to do is to explain to her why it's wrong. I think to give her the opportunity first to explain it and to be completely honest, not just lie to you and tell her she's told him, but to be completely honest. And then perhaps, you know, maybe not give an ultimatum, but I think, you know, definitely explain to them why it's wrong, tell them in no uncertain terms that they should do this, and then hopefully not get yourself too involved, because I think the less involved that you can be in this situation, which is very clearly complex, the better. And then if that doesn't occur, then you'd have to reconsider your how you go about it.
Okay. So what if Randy explicitly asked you, is Clara cheating on me?
Yeah, so I've kind of preempted a lot of what the considerations I said in the first thing would come into play. Many of those same things, you know, your relationship with, what's his name, Ronnie or Randy, your relationship with Clara, these sort of things, what they've told each other first. Yeah, I think it would really depend. I don't think generally it's probably not your place to get in. Like generally, I think the better thing to do is not to try and get involved as least as possible and try and leave them to sort it out themselves. But that's a vastly different situation than if Clara's told you that she would tell him, she's lied to him, and you know, then Ronnie asks you, because for example, in that situation, if you say yes, she is cheating on me, he says, well, no, she's not, then you've made the issue worse. So I think it really depends on the background information in that scenario. But I think as a blanket rule, you would try to avoid lying where possible, and then sort of go from there.
Okay. It's a few months later and you find out that Clara is pregnant, but she doesn't know who the father is. She asks you to promise not to say anything to Randy about it. What would you do now?
Okay, so I guess it's kind of a similar thing in the situation where my response would depend on how well I knew Randy and all these things. I think it is a similar ethical thing in that she's doing something underhanded or that, you know, is deceptive. I think in the situation of a pregnancy, again, you do have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume that it was consensual, this pregnancy and all that. I think even more so the stakes are a lot higher here, where you should absolutely explain to her why it's wrong in the same situation and then go from there. Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of crossover with this one. and the previous one, just perhaps with higher stakes. So I don't really want to repeat myself, but I think similar course of action.
Okay. What if instead of Clara being your friend, this was a professional situation? So Clara is the patient of a consultant obstetrician and you are working with them as a junior doctor. The obstetrician then tells you that they knew the baby wasn't Randy's. The consultant has asked you to keep it a secret because it would be less paperwork.
Okay, well, that's a probably more clear-cut ethical sort of like they've acted in a very clearly unethical way. But at the same time, you do need to consider your professionals, as you know, bad as it is to say, it is important to consider your professional standing. We're all in this medical interview because we want to be doctors. If you're a junior obstetrician, you're another 5 years, 10 years down the line from what we are. So you don't want to be a maverick and just, you know, as much as it'd be like, say, you stand up to them and puff your chest out and you do the right thing, the reality is that's not what would happen. Or, you know, you have to act with a little bit more tact than that. At the same time, I'd like to think most of us here have a pretty strong conscience, and I know that I do, and I don't handle well secrets or unresolved conflict. So I think I would have to also have some respect for myself and for the patient and do the right thing. So I think in that scenario, it would, you know, obviously depend on my level of interaction with this person, my level of relationship. But I think at an appropriate time, in a time where, you know, in a setting where we're alone and we can discuss candidly, I think I would discuss the gross misdemeanor this is, the implications of it can have both on them and the patient, and how much of a slap in the face it is against all that we've been taught and learned, and for the sake of paperwork. And so I think that's the best way to satisfy both your own professional interests, which, you know, I think really are important to state, but at the same time doing the right thing by everyone involved in the situation. And I think that probably balances it best.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark. So that is the end of that station. So how do you think you went?
Other than forgetting the dude's name like 5 times, I thought okay. I mean, it's a really tough one with these ones where it's so open-ended, where I feel like, I think I did. I think like I was, you know, probably easier having pen and paper here to kind of write my thoughts down just even quickly, and try to consider a few different perspectives. It's a tough one because there's so many variables in this, and you don't want to just keep going around in circles. But at the same time, it is hard to speak with sort of a real emphatic, you know, you should do this when there's so many variables, you know. So I think I did an okay job of touching on a few different considerations, and you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. They are tough situations. And I guess that's part of the reason they test you on them, is because they are so variable and there are so many caveats to it. But I think you did well, all things considered. Does anyone want to give any feedback before I have a go?
I just wanted to say, first of all, well done. I think the way you articulated yourself was fantastic. One thing I would just be mindful of, again, I think this is obviously very new to all of us, but in the MMI style, just being concise with your time, but you explained yourself really well. So there is a fine line between explaining yourself thoroughly and also keeping it concise. So yeah, just practicing and making sure that that's something you're mindful of. If it's only 5 minutes, at this time we got 8 minutes.
Yeah, that's
well done.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure whether we were going by 8 or 5 minutes by that one.
Yeah, so for today we're going by 8, but yeah, it does depend on whichever school.
Yeah, I'm Melbourne 1, Queensland 2. I believe they're both 8 by 5, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, practice for that. But again, as Sarah said before, they will cut you off if you are going too far over time. So they will make sure in most circumstances, I believe, that you either answer all the questions, or if you don't answer all the questions, you won't be marked down for not getting to certain questions.
Yeah, I did one of the, I don't know if it's come out yet, one of the podcasts with Karim, and I think I missed one of the questions or something, and then we went through it out like after, but he's like, look, you got like 3 of the 4, but it's not necessarily like you'd rather do 3 well than 4, you know, skim through. It's not necessarily like you get like a mark out of 5 for each one. It's more just the totality. But it's definitely something I've got to be worried about, be more concise.
Yeah, no, I think like you definitely did well in this, in that you answered the questions in an extended manner. You explained why you were thinking the way you were thinking. So I don't think be afraid of that. Yeah, it's definitely not something that they're going to mark you down for. If anything, it's a good way to approach these questions. So do we want to get one or two more people to maybe give some feedback quickly?
Yeah, I can go. So yeah, firstly, Mark, I think you did really well. I think that sort of question is a bit, left, or I hadn't seen a question like that in my preparation so far, although my preparation's been a bit limited. But yeah, I guess I thought you communicated well, obviously, and you're confident and you used a bit of sense of humor, which I think goes a long way in these sort of interviews, especially if the markers are kind of listening to the same sort of response every single time. And yeah, you told a story, I guess, with a lot of possible scenarios and avenues, which I think is a good way to go about it. Yeah, I guess towards the end, you also talked about how you weren't a big fan of like unresolved conflict and how that kind of would guide your decision in making sure you get to the bottom of it. And I guess communicating with the obstetrician and Randy. So I thought you relayed that back to yourself, which was quite good. But I guess one thing, my one little bit of advice would be, I guess it's a good way to, with Randy, who's kind of in like a difficult situation, obviously, and with being cheated on. And it's kind of a good way to demonstrate like your own empathy or towards Randy, because I guess, you can, an act of omission or by not telling Randy is a bit of an act of maleficence, I guess. And it can harm Randy by omitting certain information. So I guess that's kind of a good way to show that you're empathetic towards Randy, because he's obviously in a difficult situation and his life's going to be kind of affected regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. Sarah, did you want to give some stuff? Would you want me to go first? It's up to you.
I think I might let you go first, so I don't take anything that you'd like to say, Georgia.
No worries. Okay. So I thought you did pretty well in this station. I think like your delivery was great. You gave those extended responses we were just talking about before, which meant that I could see how you were considering each point. You were weighing up what was important, what are the things to consider before making a rash decision. And I could see your thought process in terms of you considered all these different factors and then that informed your decision. So that was really great to see as well. I also really liked how you brought in your personal experience and used that to kind of back up your claims, because that saw you were able to reflect. It saw that you had been through tough things before and you were resilient and you knew how to handle conflict, which was great. It was also really great how you ended up making a decision on what you were going to do, because often that's something that a lot of students forget, and they're so busy trying to weigh up everything that they don't actually say, this is what I would do. So that was really great to see as well. I also thought that I saw you a couple of times take a minute, figure out what you were going to say and then deliver, which, as we spoke about before, is a good thing to do. I also liked that you remained non-judgmental, and then like Jake just said before, you brought your own personal values into it and you kind of described why you were going to do the things that you said, and how you said you didn't like conflict and how you preferred to leave things in a non-conflictual way. So that was really good to see as well. Yeah, that was kind of as far as I went. Obviously, eye contact, like that's going to be something that you work on.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise, I think you're on a great start.
I think like one thing I probably didn't like, kind of Jake kind of mentioned it with non-maleficence, but I think also probably, and I kind of spoke to Karim about this, like I try and be more conversational, like my tone in these, I try to be sort of how I would talk to maybe not quite like a friend with no medical background, but certainly closer to that than I would in, say, my 6-month review coming up in 2 weeks' time when I'm, so I think maybe trying to find the right balance between being conversational, but also showing, hey, I do know my stuff.
Yeah, one thing I did pick up on a bit was the fact that you kind of mentioned collateral damage in the first question. And while I understand what you're trying to say, I think it may be a little bit too colloquial and a little bit too dismissive. So I'd use something more like what the ramifications would be or what the outcomes would be or things like that. Yeah, I kind of agree. In some stages you did get a bit colloquial, but again, that just depends on your style and it depends on what you're more comfortable doing. So yeah. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, cool. That's probably the only thing I wanted to elaborate on. I guess I have the privilege of, I know Mark a little bit more than I know most of you. So I'm more than happy, Mark, anyone, for you to come with whatever dynamic, whatever conversational level you feel comfortable with and you prefer. And the colloquialisms are fine. It's about what you do with those statements. So if the statement is collateral damage, then give an example. So say, for example, blah, blah, blah. So like some examples here, like what would be some of the maleficence that Randy is subject to automatically, and would this weigh up certain things in your decision making? For example, the STI risk of this situation, or now that we've got into question 3, question 4, and she's pregnant, we've got some other risks happening, the risk to a child not knowing who their true father is. Things like that bring up a lot of ethical turmoil that by saying the word collateral damage, you've like kind of missed the opportunity to really ace it. So take a moment to go, what's an example I can give? Here's one example. You definitely don't have to list all of the things. You can just pick something that you're like, this would be a pretty crap thing to happen. So I'll just give that as an example. And then that lets us in to like your level of language of what you mean by that collateral damage.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I kind of used it more in the sense of like they're standing within the group in A and B. I should have changed my tone for.
And I really liked, hopefully everyone sort of like noticed the wording that you used was, it's very hard to say what I would do when I don't have more details. Like that was just like really clear, made sense, duh. And absolutely you can say something like that in a station. I think it's really good to have phrases like that you're comfortable with saying. So yeah, awesome. I think that was, yeah, probably the only other thing, again, like with the elaborating, how in the last question with the professional setting, I love how you said, you know what, I would speak in a setting when we're alone, and then I would discuss with him candidly, or discuss with the consultant candidly what was going on. Give an example of something you would say. And you can say it in your own way, in your own conversational way, keep it real. But say, for example, I'd say it like this. For example, I would say, hey, I personally feel uncomfortable. Like this is just what I would say, not what you're supposed to say, Mark. Personally, I would feel uncomfortable with knowing that a patient walked out of the room and the only reason they didn't know the truth was because of less paperwork. If that's the issue, I'm happy to help out with the paperwork. And like maybe that's how I would start the conversation, and like just give an example of something that you would say to show your connection to it.
So maybe like if I really put the patient at the forefront, in a way it also takes the like it makes it me being less like, hey, this is my gripe with you. It's more about for the greater good.
Yeah. And like if you wanted to take a different approach, that's okay too. Just give the examiner an example of whatever your approach would begin to look like.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because like I had a conflict in my PhD, and like I kind of spoke to a few friends and they said like coming from it, like it's affecting your learning rather than my feelings are hurt, or like I don't like this. And I think it was they were all more receptive to that. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. So good. Good job. Any other questions? Anything else that Georgia wants to add?
Is my Halad hoodie coming for winter closes?
All I can say is that they weren't shipped to my house. But follow up for you.
This winter breeze is really biting through this crew neck t-shirt.
Is now a good time to say that I have 3?
I just had a question in sort of how he was elaborating upon the question and saying, oh, well, I'd consider whether it was like she was cheating because he was an abusive boyfriend, and like went into all of that sort of like not specified in the question, but like just backtracking into like personal experience, like how you'd react to that. Would you recommend doing that? And like, yeah, that's pretty much my question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess if the goal of the station is to tell us what you would choose, and if you're sitting there going, I don't know what I would choose because all these things are coming to mind that could be possibilities, then that's more than reasonable to say. And to say, actually, like, unless I know X, Y, Z, and unless I know that this is happening or that is happening or this isn't or that isn't, then I can't really make a decision. But if this was happening, then I would make that decision. So I think it's not right or wrong to bring in something that could, and I know particularly with bringing in something like abuse could be a more sensitive topic. It's not right or wrong to bring that in or not bring it in. It's more what you do with that information, how you showcase your ability to think through the station.
Right. So as long as you make like a decision based on like saying something like something that was happening that would sway you to one side or the other, and then answer that, that would be your decision making.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really great technique for you to all use, is to do something like that, because then you've given yourself some extra content to work with. So you can pick something that you're comfortable with and say, you know what, like if I knew also that there was abuse involved, then I would make this decision. Then you've actually helped yourself because you've contextualized the situation a bit better. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything they want clarified or any questions? I don't know how much longer we've got, Sarah.
I think we're right on. Yeah.
Sounds good. I might see you guys back there then.
Thank you. I'll give you a couple more seconds to fill out the poll. If anyone has any questions about that station still unanswered, or just in general about what we've done so far, please put it in the chat. So just, I had one thing that I wanted to quickly go over, is that a lot of questions in MMI start with what if, and they're very open. So it's like, what if this happened? Or what if someone walked in and said this thing? They're really vague questions. The reason why they ask questions this way and ask what if is so that you have the opportunity to offer as much information as you would like to, and to structure it however you would like. So rather than asking what are the pros and cons of telling Randy, it's just what if. So then if you want to share pros and cons, you can. If you want to share different considerations, you can. If you want to share personal experience, you can. So that's that question type. If you hear a what if, rather than clarifying and going, what do you mean? What do you want me to say? It's an open-ended so that you can make the most of the question. Cool. And it's good to see, I think people were a little bit more comfortable with this station type, probably more familiar with it. So more like 3s, 4s, 5s, as opposed to the problem solving station, which was closer to 1s or 2s. These reflections are really helpful for you to know what you would like to work on after tonight. So take note of how you're feeling after each station so that you know what you want to keep practicing with. So the next station, we're going to do a public health based station. Public health stations are quite broad. Basically, they can be any station that has anything to do with public health or health education, or the way that we try and communicate health and well-being to the community. So public health stations, very likely that you guys will see something COVID related this year in your MMIs. Don't be surprised. So if you were to prepare any topic, I would say prepare a little bit about that. But today we're not going to do a COVID one. The goal of these stations is to showcase your understanding of public health in general, why it's important for people to understand and have a good level of health literacy, how it affects them, things like that, and to show your opinions on important public health topics where it's relevant. So this is a good place to practice things like what I mentioned before with the controversial opinion thing. If something comes up, maybe it is about the COVID vaccine and there is a lot of controversial opinion around that, what does your response to that look like? So this is one of those stations where you will get to showcase that kind of thinking. You might need to make decisions. I'm not going to go over it again because the decision-making component is really similar to the ethics station one. So you will notice that there is quite a crossover between ethics and public health stations. They're pretty much the same. It's more just that this has a public health focus. What the marker is looking for is whether you're able to understand all the implications of a public health station, particularly what are all of the moving parts. So public health stations have lots of different elements. There's things like government and policy, and there's things like the individual and their health. So understanding all of the elements. Can you identify the different stakeholders and the different factors of the scenario? So look at the scenario, what particularly is really being affected in this scenario. Understand the downstream effects of public health interventions. So for example, if you had a public health intervention that was for safe driving and maybe it was changing the speed limit, understanding what actually is the desired effect of that, how does that affect people, why does that matter, etc. And then ethical considerations are the same as the ethics station. So any of those main four of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, and any other ethical sort of viewpoints and mindsets that relate to the station. That's what we're looking for. So that's a little bit of a snippet on the public health station. Can I just get like a nod, thumbs up, yes in the chat if everyone's ready to have a look at this station? Cool, we're excited. Great. Great to see. So I'm going to start the timer for 2 minutes and you can read the scenario. Okay, and that's time. So I'll get Eliza to open the breakout rooms for you.
Cool.
Younger children. Oh, it also might not mean much to younger children who don't really know what the difference could be, and they might just be driven by their instinct to get the lower nutritional food that is traditionally yummier, or well, yummier looking than the green food, which might be vegetables or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the next question is, do you think that children as young as 5-year-old should be responsible for making their own choices about food? Why or why not?
I don't think they should be responsible for making their own choices. I think that if the school has the capacity to have these green stickered healthy foods that that is what they should be giving these children, because at that age, that's when you start to eat things that you get used to for the rest of your life, and that can influence their choices when they get older and when they get to pick their own food. I feel like as you get older, you can introduce that choice, but setting these foundations of normalizing healthy food and teaching children to enjoy healthy food is very important for their long-term future. I think, yeah, if the school has the capacity to have these green foods, they should just have the green sticker foods every day, except maybe like on Fridays, you can have a treat in the orange range or something like that.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question is, what if there was a merit-based system attached to the foods that the children selected, where those who chose more green foods would earn points for their house or a redeemable award?
I think that's a better way of incentivizing eating healthy food, and it definitely models, I guess, the choice that these children will have when they grow up and they go to a grocery store and they have to pick between, well, they have to be able to resist the temptation of getting dinner from the junk food aisle, I guess, and picking vegetables. So I guess that does stimulate the real world environment and give them an incentive to choose a healthier food. But again, I'm not sure how that would play with younger children who might not be able to control their urges or really understand the point of a merit-based system, and they might again go and pick the unhealthy foods, or even the tropes and trends where maybe in a particular school that merit system of winning the most house points isn't that popular, and a particular friendship group might not care about that, and therefore that incentive does not work anymore, and these children may again go and pick the unhealthy options.
Yeah, okay, thank you. What if there was a limit on the number of orange and red foods children could select per day or week?
Yeah, I think that's definitely better. Like I said, sometimes I think we should teach children that it's okay to have a treat every now and then. I think it would be great if we did have a limit that you could have an orange or red food maybe once or twice a week. And that way we can still normalize the green, healthier foods and make that a staple in their diet.
Okay, the last question is, what are some other ways we can promote healthy eating in children whilst ensuring they have a healthy relationship with food and their bodies?
I think taking the stigma away from like, oh, broccoli is yucky, and really presenting options in the cafeteria that are yummy and look fun, like maybe things in, I don't know, a smiley face shape rather than just having like a green salad, which children learn to associate with as disgusting from a very young age. So definitely having like fun lunches that are healthy and also taste yum as healthy food can be. I guess supplementing that with an education curriculum that kind of shows like, oh, this food is brain food, this helps you work at school, whereas another type of food, like, you know what, it's great as a treat, but it's not really going to get you through the day. Or I don't know, maybe for athletic students, like this particular food is going to help you run fast and grow strong. So definitely supplementing that diet with an education curriculum to get their health literacy up to speed so that they can make more informed choices.
Okay, thank you very much. And would you like to add anything to your previous answers, or would you like me to repeat any of the answers again?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you, Eamon. That was really good. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you for stepping up and doing that. I'm sure it was beneficial for everyone as well. So how did you think you went from it?
I think I went okay. I think I could have done better in some places, but yeah, just happy that I had a shot.
What did you think you did well in?
Maybe identifying like incentives and looking at the different groups of primary school children, like the younger ones and the older ones.
Yep, great. Okay, so I guess I'll just start with general feedback. I really like the way you communicated your points across. You're very clear you weren't mumbling. It was very easy to understand. And you weren't like, I think the speed of you talking was also really good. You weren't like too fast and a bit frantic. Like you felt very calm and very confident. So that was a really good thing for me to hear and I kind of perceive from you as well. And so yeah, that was really excellent. And so I guess with the general, general feedback as well, I think the best way in terms of any questions that has pros and cons or any listing questions, it's just really good to signpost at the start. To just say, I will talk about the pros and cons and then just go pros and then talk them out, then cons and talk them out as well. Because that way it's easier for you to talk about them. It's also easier for examiners to understand. Yeah, so I guess we'll go through each of the questions as well, and then just go through the feedback for each of them as well. So the first one with the what are the pros and the cons, as I said before, if it's listing, just signposting is really helpful. But I really liked how, and you did do that, you did the pros first. I think your mind was a little bit jumbly right at the very start, maybe because you're a bit nervous, because you talked pros for about half a sentence and then went straight to cons. But that's okay, like you're suddenly warmed up, and by the end of the questions you felt really confident. But I think, yeah, signposting probably would have really helped as well in that case. And so going to the second question, do you think children as young as 5-year-olds? So yeah, I really liked the examples that you were giving in terms of that, like children, like this school should be responsible for it, and you gave really good examples for it. But I think another way you could potentially think about it is also from the child's perspective. So you talked about the school and what they can do, but also think about like the limitations of a 5-year-old, like just in general life, like 5-year-olds make decisions like that big, and think about it from their perspective as well. So you could have probably expanded from 2 different viewpoints. So the schools as well as the children's. Yeah, and so with the third question, what if there was a merit-based system? Let me just, sorry, I'm just reading through the notes that you were talking about as well. Yeah, so I liked how you were talking about giving it sort of an example of how the stuff that they learn now is related to what they're going to do in the future. So this is kind of a lot of like public health. You know, the point of education and things is so that they can make people can make decisions themselves. And when you mentioned that, you know, children, if they can learn to choose things themselves and be able to resist temptation, then they might be able to do that in the future, which is like really good. So you can apply what they're doing to actually in the real world, which is a good thing to see. And oh yeah, and it was also a really good thing that you mentioned about like the peer pressure. I thought it was a really interesting perspective, especially because, you know, peer pressure can change so much. Media can change so much as well, as we all know. As soon as one person says, oh, red foods are good, and everyone starts eating red foods, you know, whole things can go into a mess. So that was a really good kind of point to bring out. So I really like that. And yeah, you had really good ideas throughout the entire process as well. And you seemed really confident in your answers again. So it's all coming through. And then the next question is, what if there was the limit on the number of orange and red foods in children? You said that, I think with this question, you could have potentially talked a bit more about both sides as well. You really emphasized on the fact that it's good to have a treat, and, you know, that's really good, but you could probably think of it from a different perspective as well, in terms of why is it bad to have those orange and red foods. So that way you can you can show the examiners that you can think about it from two different perspectives, and how, like, because usually with a lot of public health as well, there is this issue of the balance, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, good. And the last question, what are some ways that we can promote healthy eating? I think this was like the best answer that you had. You were just so confident. It was really good to hear. And the fact that it sounded like you were like trying to sell to me, you know, yeah, we should, you know, make these foods look fun and enjoyable to eat. And it was just like really good to hear. And it kind of makes, it made me feel like that it was something that you would kind of do as well, like put your own and like what you believe in as well, which is good because that gives the examiners some part of your personality, your morals, your values. So that was really good to hear as well. So yeah, I didn't really have too much to say in the last one. I thought it was a really good answer. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask or say? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Who's speaking? Sorry, Tina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we like best prepare for the questions when we're like during reading time? There's just like so many things to think about. When I'm reading the prompt, I don't really know what to start
Yeah.
thinking about.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So it's kind of depending on how you like to talk about things. And as Sarah was saying before, she was saying like, oh, we're going to talk about it in terms of pros and cons, or can you talk about it in terms of the stakeholders and different viewpoints? So it just depends how you like to kind of give your argument and the structure that you like. But for me, what worked the best was within that 2 minutes was figure out who was involved in the STEM. So for example, in this scenario, so it would be the kids would be involved. It would also be the school being involved. And so within that 2 minutes, I'll be like, okay, how is having this going to impact the children? Is it going to benefit them? Is it not going to benefit them? And because they said like primary school children, how is it limited to that population and that age group? Because children is different to adults. So that's probably something that you have to think about in the 2 minutes. And in terms of the school, you can think about it in terms of, so kind of what Eamon said, like how is the school actually going to complete this traffic light system? Is it just going to be putting red stickers, red, green, orange stickers, or will they actually try put education into it and think about what, like pretend that you're the principal and you're going to enforce this. So think about what the principal has to think about while putting this system into the school.
Yeah, great. That makes sense. Thank you.
As I was saying this to my previous group, I think the most crucial part is the 2 minutes. Like that 2 minutes, you think about kind of what, and after you do a lot of questions on the MMI stations, you start seeing some trends in the questions that they actually ask you. So in that 2 minutes, you usually gather kind of like, oh, what could they potentially ask me? And then try to figure out the answers for those in those 2 minutes. And most of the time, we're going to have that question.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
It's all good.
I think as well, I would just add to, with your reading time, once you've read the scenario for the first time, pay attention to your gut reaction to it. That is such an insightful response for you to have. So when I read this scenario, my gut reaction makes me feel really angry. And then I ask myself, why do I feel angry? And I feel angry because I think that it's wrong to tell children what to eat because it gives them morals. for their like it attaches morals to food. And I think that's really dangerous in such a diet cultured world. So already I have this really strong opinion for the station. That's my opinion. And it's based on my gut reaction. So you will all have your own. Someone else will have had an entirely different opinion. Iman had a completely different opinion. Her opinion was about the importance of teaching children about eating vegetables and making it fun. So maybe she felt excited or saw this and was like, yeah, what a good idea. So listen to your gut reaction when you read the STEM. It's really helpful.
Yeah, that's really good point, Sarah. But also try not to fall into the trap of just staying to your opinion. It's really hard because if you're like feeling so passionate about something and you're kind of ignoring the other perspectives, then that's also kind of a little bit of a warning sign.
Yeah, then think about like what other questions they could ask you and start to like open your mind.
Anyone else have any questions?
All right, everyone's back. So if anyone has any questions about that station, if you can put them in the chat and if you can fill out how you felt about it on the poll. Okay. And just while people are answering the poll, just like a reminder or an overall recap of these public health stations, absolutely you can bring in your own thoughts, opinions, and things that you don't necessarily think are purely public health, because you're not going to see big banner public health station up the top. It will just be a station. It's more a guide of like different kinds of stations you can focus on preparing with and preparing around and different things to think about, but they're not going to tell you the exact type of station. So be willing and open to your mind being open. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions in the chat for those watching the recording, we had a lecture on the implementation of a traffic light system at Alfred Hospital in third year uni. Would a discussion of that be useful in answering that question, such as if we remember their findings, parroting some of their reasoning? Absolutely. Just make sure that you connect it back to the scenario and the relevance of the scenario. So this scenario is in a child-based setting, it's in a school. So talking about the differences between and the similarities between an adult and a pediatric setting and why there might be different considerations in this scenario compared with the scenario at the Alfred Hospital, and also why we or where we would and where we wouldn't expect the same results if you are going to decide to share your knowledge on that. Great. And it looks like people were a little bit more comfortable with this station, maybe more familiar with public health or just talking about this in general than the previous two, so 3s, 4s and 5s, which is awesome. So just a little disclaimer as well, we'll probably finish about 10 minutes late. If you do have to leave, that's totally fine. But yeah, just thought I would let you know, it looks like we'll run about 10 minutes over. So the last station type that we're going to do is an Indigenous health-based station. Now, I'm just going to give you a bit of a disclaimer that mostly with stations with MMIs, there's not much prior knowledge expected. So like the question that was just put in the chat about, oh, I know a little bit about this traffic light system at the Alfred. That's great. If you have some prior knowledge on anything, go for it, but it's not expected. With Indigenous health and with rural health, there is some expected prior knowledge. There are some resources that you can use. We can send some out afterwards for you as well, or the examiners in your rooms might know of some that are helpful. With Indigenous health particularly, it's being aware of cultural significance and of cultural respect and things that you need to consider, and also being aware of relevant supports you can offer, particularly in a professional setting. So that would probably be some good starting points for you if you feel really uncomfortable with these kinds of topics, or you feel like you don't really know how to approach a discussion about them because you don't really understand much. So the goal is not for you to communicate that you understand everything or that you know it all about this topic, but absolutely it's for you to demonstrate awareness and respect and an understanding specific to Indigenous culture, because this is a very important part of our healthcare system and the healthcare that we provide. And with that as well, if you do identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander or as an Indigenous person, absolutely you can share that and share your experience and share from your viewpoint. So no need to pretend that you are or aren't or whatnot. Come with your own cultural understanding, sensitivity, and identity. So then integrating your knowledge into all of the other things that you would use for a typical station. So other than it being an Indigenous health station, it's also going to have the necessity to make decisions, or it might have some ethics or some public health or something. Make sure you balance both. Make sure you address both in these stations. The marker is looking for that awareness and sensitivity toward culture and is looking for you to be able to balance that with the other side of just whatever the scenario is that you've been presented with. And they are expecting some relevant Indigenous cultural knowledge. It doesn't have to be very deep, but it's showing your particular sensitivity towards things that they expect that you should know about. So like I mentioned, if you would like some resources, we can send some out of some of the things that you're expected to know. So with that in mind, let's have a go at our final station. Here's the scenario. I'll give you 2 minutes to read it and then we'll go to breakout rooms.
Last one.
You have the opportunity to speak to Mary privately. What do you discuss?
In my conversation with Mary, I would lay out all of her options. So firstly, the transport ambulance that she might be able to take, but I would also tell her like the ramifications of that and what might happen if she does not get adequate care, and also lay out that situation to her, but also make it very clear that it's her decision as to which route she wants to take. And I would also lay out the situation of, you know, if her husband drives her home and what if he encounters traffic, things like that, things that might be able to be mitigated if she was in a transport ambulance. And yeah, basically make it known to her all of her options, and at the end of the day, it's her decision as to what she decides to do. And yeah, I would make my medical opinion known as well, but also make it very clear that her own autonomy is also very important.
What additional support and services could you consider in this situation?
Additional support, maybe if there was an advisor nearby, or if there were other people I could consult about this, other doctors that might have similar experience dealing with this sort of situation. And potentially, I'm not sure if this would be available, but if it was available, potentially hospital services that are catered for First Nations people, that would be consulted as well.
What would you recommend Mary and her husband do?
From a medical standpoint, I would say that as a doctor, her health is of utmost importance to me, her and her unborn baby's health. And because of that, I would recommend that she get an ambulance to a closer hospital rather than her local hospital. But I would also obviously state that her cultural mores are also very important, and I understand that she cares a lot about that, and I understand that she has a deep connection to her land and she wants her baby to be born on that land as well.
Okay, cool. So that was about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So, but that's okay. Sometimes that happens. I sat in an interview with my lady for like 2 minutes just in silence. It feels awkward. It's fine. That I think you spoke really clearly. Actually, no, I'm going to turn it to everyone else first. Does anyone else have any feedback they would like to give?
I will jump in if that's okay.
Yeah.
First thing I'd like to say is I really liked the way that you articulated your thought process, saying that I would outline my patient's options. I would give it to her as to this is what I recommend first, and then these are the, I guess, first or most concerning outcomes if these all go wrong or that sort of thing. But the biggest thing that I liked that you, I guess, we're summing up that whole statement is that you would give your medical, or make sure that your medical opinion is known, because at the end of the day, your position is that you are her doctor. And you're trying to treat her holistically and take into consideration what she wants and what her husband wants, but making it known that your main priority is her and her baby. Your pace and tone of voice was also spot on. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any feedback they'd like to give?
I think you're really sensitive towards like the cultural aspect of it all, because I would imagine that it would be a really like challenging time to be away from where you would want to have birth. And so I think you were very like reassuring, like, I understand what you want, but this is the medical situation that you're in. So I think that was like really well done.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can say something. So yeah, definitely spoke super clearly, and you were really concise, and which was good because you covered most of the aspects of the questions, which is exactly what you want to do. There's no point rambling on unnecessarily. So I think you did that really well, and you had that solid structure, and you emphasized your medical opinion, but also really talked about that at the end of the day, it's definitely her choice and she has autonomy, and it came across that it was completely patient-centered care, which is exactly what you want.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
You really demonstrated you were very empathetic, and someone commented on you really understood the situation. It felt like from the woman's angle and the husband's angle. If constructive feedback, if you notice you're racing through it, then that gives you the opportunity to like take those breaks when you get the question, have those, the 15-30 seconds to think about it and just to see what you can squeeze out of that. So that'd be my little pointer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think I could have elaborated more and maybe taken more time to sort of think.
Yeah, I think overall they're right. You spoke very clearly, very fluently. I didn't get lost at any point. You signposted really well, which is key in not only interviews, but when you get into med school, talking with patients, signposting is just, I can't emphasize how important it is. So it's really great that you did that. And I think there's a fine, like it's hard to balance trying to tease everything out and then not rambling. So I think you can afford to tease your things out more because you're very succinct. I understood very clearly, but I think you can explore some of your ideas in more depth. And I think, yeah, taking the moment to pause and figure out what it is you want to say and in more depth is okay. It's better that you critically think about these things and take the time to think about it than feel you need to rush through it. It didn't seem rushed to me, but the point is you can take that moment, if that makes sense. I think, yeah, great that you spoke about autonomy. That's key in everything. I think in the first question, I think your considerations were spot on. I liked it. You also considered the husband. He's mentioned there for a reason. And you do need to consider, although family is not technically your priority, obviously family is a big component in any healthcare situation. So it's great that you did consider that as well. And I think all your points were spot on, just like teasing them out a little bit more, going into a bit more depth. So the things that we thought about considering, obviously it's time sensitive. So just making that clear that obviously this is an emergent situation. So that's something to consider as well that changes this a bit. Obviously your duty of care as a medical professional, which you kind of spoke about. Yeah, you got the patient autonomy and you discussed the Indigenous culture. You weren't judgmental. I think it's sometimes important to make clear that I can't pretend to know exactly what it's like in your shoes, but I will try my best to understand and to provide medical care that you are happy with. Like making that clear. I think you already kind of touched on it, but it helps to be like, I can never really understand, but I'm trying to do my best. I think with the second question, so it's kind of tricky because they say, what do you discuss? And I think the key is also about communicating back with the patient. So not only giving your medical opinion, but also like having a two-way conversation. It's really important. It's really what this patient-centered care is all about that we really like these days, is not only giving your patient the choice, but asking them questions about what matters to them. Obviously she wants to be on home, but specifically, why is it important for you to go home? What can we do to make you feel comfortable if that is no longer an option? Those kind of things. So making it, a two-way conversation, because you're right about everything you would say to her, but also just acknowledging I need to listen back. That's part of my job. That's how we do it in real life, you know? For question 3, I think it's hard because you're not in med school, so you haven't been given the resources to know how to support an Indigenous patient. So I guess, again, it's looking at the things that Sarah will give you later. But you did mention about First Nation support in hospitals. So we have something called Aboriginal liaison officers. They're really great. You make a referral with the permission of your patient, you can make a referral to those and they can help support and really be that voice for your patient, considering all of that cultural stuff. It's obviously not to offhand that that's still your role. You still need to consider that yourself, but it helps to give that support in an area where you might not have complete knowledge. So they're really great. And then, just going through those resources later, that's something that's relatively easy to do, and that'll just help you out with any questions, really. And then, your last one was good. I think it was kind of reiterating what you said earlier, but again, you focused on that autonomy and all of that stuff. You recognize that you're still a doctor and you still have to provide your medical opinions. That was good. You made a good balance of, I'm considering culture and being sensitive to that, but also I'm a doctor and what's the medical aspect of this? You covered, I think it was good that you covered it sort of both half and half, if that makes sense. Gave equal thought to both of those things.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
That's all right. Sorry, that was a lot to take in. I just thought I'll get it off your chest and then you can hear it, but you did really, really well.
Okay, awesome, cool. Yeah, never really answered a question before with friends or with anyone.
It's hard. You just gotta, the more you practice, the more you feel, because everyone has great ideas. It's just practicing articulating them. And sometimes you'll say it and you'll be like, wow, that came out weird. Let's try that again. So the more you practice, the better it will get. Because you all do have great ideas. That's not a question.
All right. And looks like people are feeling a little bit more confident about this one, although some are like sitting at 2s and 3s. Probably a lot of that is familiarity with a topic like Indigenous health. So we will send some resources and just some things to get you started. But also a question that sort of leads on from that is this one. Let me re-find it. Would you say to learn stats for public and rural/Indigenous health? So in terms of knowing specific details, how much to know, should I know statistics, should I not? Don't stress, don't sweat it. It's not any more impressive for you to come and rattle off a bunch of facts. If you happen to know a statistic, if you happen to know a fact, if it was an interest area for you or something that stuck out to you, perfectly fine to say. Think about like, what would I say in a normal conversation about this topic? Am I putting this statistic in there just to sound really impressive? If so, the examiners can definitely tell and it feels really awkward. If you're saying it because you're like, I remembered this stat, I thought it was really cool, it totally relates to this scenario, go for it. So there's no hard and fast yes or no, but absolutely no prerequisite to remember a statistic. And likewise, I'm not going to mark someone higher just because they knew a statistic off the top of their head. In terms of writing notes during reading time, particularly for online interviews, are you allowed to take notes? I actually don't know. Anyone who sat exams last year, particularly on like Sonru or a similar platform, were you able to take notes?
I don't think so for Sonru. I mean, you don't really have much time because you'll get like the 60 seconds of the prompt, but then you move on, they give you 15 seconds to read your question and then it starts recording you. So I didn't really have much time to write notes. I think for Zoom interviews, I probably would recommend not like handwriting notes where the examiner knows that you're looking somewhere else. But I guess if you want to quickly jot down some notes on your laptop and they can't really tell that you're doing it, that's fine. But I found with Monash interviews anyway, the scenario was like, it was quite easy to remember, like it wasn't much. And you can always just ask them if you ever do get lost. Like you can just be like, oh, could you just clarify this part of the scenario for me? Like normally they're happy to do that.
I don't know if it was the same for yours, Jazz, but I know with mine, they kept like the STEM projected up on the screen anyway throughout.
Yeah, I think most of my stations did that. I guess it varies with unis, but with Monash's stations, majority of them left the STEM up.
Thank you. Yeah, and just as an overall, I know that there's all sorts of mix with COVID and online and not online and whatnot, but generally MMIs are not a note taking during reading time based interview or exam. So treat it as a no. And then if you do get to jot something down on the day, like that's a bonus. Any tips on where to find some more practice scenarios or questions? Great question. I can send some out with the recording, some different links. If anyone else here knows any or has some that they're happy to share, feel free to pop your email in the chat or to share around. But also I found it helpful to just write scenarios with friends. Yep, Fraser's MMI generator has a lot of good generic stations. We also have a podcast where we run some stations on there, and all of the stations we used for our mock MMIs last year, we're going to be like putting on there. So you can always listen to the scenario stem and go away and practice it on your own. Sounds random, but the news. Good to get you thinking about ethics and public health issues. Yeah, literally anything that stimulates you thinking through a scenario is MMI practice. And particularly if you just discussing it with friends, family, dinner table discussions, things like that, TED Talks and podcasts. Also, I know you guys can read the chat. I'm reading this out for people watching the recording, not because I think you can't read. I had another question earlier. What if I'm doing one of the panel interviews? So I know that some of the unis do panels. How do I prepare? If you have the luxury of preparing in like a pseudo panel, so maybe you can get some friends to sort of sit in a panel and do it that way, absolutely. Otherwise, practice is exactly the same. They're exactly the same kind of interview. The challenge is for you to focus on each examiner like individually, or to give them each your attention. Sometimes that's easier if each one asks a question, but also if when you're answering the question, you're able to be inclusive of the entire room and all the examiners, that's like an amazing job to be able to do that. That really shows high level interpersonal and emotional social skills because you're able to include everyone. Obviously, if you're doing it over Zoom, it's much more challenging to do that. But if you're able to sort of bring yourself into it being a group discussion, that's the best way to approach a panel interview. In terms of content, it's exactly the same. They'll ask you very similar things. So feel free to keep asking if you've got a question on your mind, etc. Just to finish up, I would love if everyone could put in the chat one thing that you've learned today from working through these stations, or something that you're going to go away and do. So maybe a goal that you have, or what you're going to focus on next, maybe a station type. And if you still have any questions, please let me know. While you do that, just letting you know, check out our podcast, check us out on Facebook, find ways to connect with us, ask us your questions. If you come up with questions after today, send me an email. I'll put it in the chat for you. And if you would like to enroll for our mock MMI circuits, they're starting very soon. They're starting on the 4th of September, and you'll get 2 hours of doing a full circuit. You'll get 8 stations, and you'll get then some personalised feedback and an opportunity to ask questions of the examiners in a cohort review. So head on to the link that I think Eliza has put in the chat for you if you'd like to sign up for those. Just to finish up, might read out what some people have said. Act confident even if you're not. Absolutely. Fake it till you make it. We can so tell if you're like confident and holding on to the station and coming in with your own opinions. So absolutely act confident, and you have no reason not to be. You guys were all amazing. Everyone that I was listening in on, such good ideas. So have confidence in those ideas. Don't be afraid of image questions. Yes. And I would extend that to literally any question. Like, you can get anything on the day, but you can do it. That my practice is working more than I thought. Yay, that's so good. How to deal with questions where info keeps getting added progressively. Yes, and that's a very common way for them to deal with the station and the scenario. Going to work on problem solving, more background on rural and public health, making eye contact through the screen. Yeah. A real great tip is you can practice just being on Zoom and like record yourself like chatting for a few minutes and see how much your eyes move around. It's really interesting to see how hard it is to focus and keep eye contact over Zoom. So on that note, I'll leave it there. Before we finish up, I just wanted to say the biggest thank you to our examiners who joined in tonight. I know that without them here, could not have run the event. You guys couldn't have gotten the quality feedback, the one-on-one sort of approach of being able to do the stations with them. So thank you so much to everyone who's come along and helped me out with the event tonight. And thank you all for coming along, and like so many cameras on, so much interaction in the groups, so awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll send out the recording, and please feel free to respond with any questions that you might have. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night, guys.